She's an Emmy-winning journalist from the White House to war zones, telling all sides of the story. This is the Rita Cosby Show.
I've heard it all, and I actually thought maybe today the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, I actually thought maybe he was kidding. Maybe he was one of those guys who, when he tells a joke, you can't tell if he's kidding or not. Turns out he was actually serious when he testified before a committee of senators who were very frustrated, and they were asking him about the border. And he had the audacity to say that the U.S. under this administration has, quote, effectively managed the ongoing border crisis. What? Are you kidding me? I bet you I could pull 500 2-year-olds off the street. Doesn't matter what city in the country. I could pull like a 6-year-old and they would say, no, that border is wide open. That's dangerous. And yet today, Alejandro Mayorkas, with a straight face, told a group of senators, a bipartisan group, in between a hearing there that was taking place, and he said, we have done an effective job of managing the border. To me, that is such an outright lie, an outright misrepresentation, and no wonder senators were furious. What's your reaction to the fact that the guy who is in charge of our homeland security, specifically the border, along with Kamala Harris, that when he testifies under oath with a straight face, actually said that the Biden administration has done a great job with managing the border? You have got to be kidding me. You just look at the numbers. Since this president has taken over, they've had almost 2 million illegal immigrants that they've had encounters with. That doesn't even include the gotaways. Those are the ones that they know about since President Biden has taken office. And then last month, they had a record 7,000 a day, totaling more than 220,000. That's the biggest number they've ever had in American history. And that's before Title 42 is about to be lifted. So to me, this is so outrageous that he wants us to buy this line of hogwash that they're doing a great job at the border. And then when they were saying, okay, well, listen, if Title 42 gets lifted, what is your plan? And his plan is to add more officers. And I thought, okay, maybe he's having an epiphany. Maybe at that moment he's going to say, okay, we need more to keep the border safe, to block them out, to keep them to remain in Mexico, to make sure that they're being vetted. He actually said the reason that they're adding more officers is they want to have more to basically be in the holding facilities and the processing facilities so they can process them faster and then release them faster into the United States. This, to me, it's like you can't make it up. What are they doing to our country? So tonight on the Rita Cosby Show, I can't wait to get your thoughts about all of this, because it comes at a time where, boy, there are major, major security threats all over the country and all over the world. And later on in the show, we're also going to talk about Russia, because some enormous threats coming from Vladimir Putin, who is really, really stepping up the ante and really going after a whole bunch of NATO allies in terms of the, rhetoric, also cutting off gas supplies. I mean, there's some really big developments that are happening over there. And now we have a wide open southern border that's about to get a lot more open, thanks to this guy who I actually think, give Will Smith's Academy Award, take it away, and give it to Alejandro Mayorkas, because that was a great acting job that I saw today, because he had a perfectly straight face saying that the Biden administration has managed the border appropriately. To me, that is an amazing job. He deserves that Oscar. Take that Will Smith Oscar, give it to Alejandro Mayorkas. He deserves that for that incredible acting job, because to me, that was the most insane comment. I thought maybe I needed wax out of my ears or something. I'm like, what? Wait, did he really say that? And then he repeated it again with a straight face. It's amazing to me. And then he was asked, okay, listen, well, what's going to happen when Title 42 gets lifted? And this is even more interesting. They come to him and he admits, oh boy, it's going to be really a deluge of people coming through our country. Yeah, it could really be a potential crisis. So why don't you stop it? Isn't that amazing? The answer would be, well, here's what we're doing to prevent that from happening. We're concerned for our own sovereignty, for our country's safety. Here's what we're going to do. No, he's going to have more people to help with the processing to get them in quicker and move them along into America. And admitted they don't get checked, they don't get vaxxed. It is really astounding to me. And you could tell today when the senators were grilling him, they were just fed up because he was doing a rope-a-dope like I've never seen. It was like ducking, weaving, bobbing. This guy really, I mean, he puts Mike Tyson to shame in the ring. This guy was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Take a listen. I want to play an exchange. This is with Congressman Norman, and he was asking Mayorkas about it. Take a listen.
And if as you say, the border is more secure, what is your definition of insecure?
Congressman, you have so grotesquely mischaracterized my position on issues and my service to this country for more than 20 years.
Your actions prove different, Mr. Secretary. Your actions prove different.
I have laid out...
The fact that hold on, this is my time. The fact, and you're not going to answer questions. You're avoiding them just like you always have.
At least he's consistent, you know. At least he's like, well, I don't really know. I'm not really sure. I mean, to me, I really rarely say this, but watching it today, I am really worried for our country's security, much more than ever. Usually when someone goes on Capitol Hill, their job is to sort of send a message of assurance to the country because everybody's watching these hearings. It's not just the members of Congress who are doing the questioning that get a chance. The whole world's kind of watching this. And I'm thinking, my goodness, you know, I thought he would maybe come up with some answer that maybe we hadn't heard that would protect our American security. And yet I am more concerned than ever. After watching him today, he seems like he has no clue. He seems like he is completely out to lunch in La La Land. And, you know, it's not a surprise that a number of members of Congress today said, you know what? It's time for you to resign. Listen to this exchange with Congressman Clay Higgins and Alejandro Mayorkas.
By God, man, on the moment, you've been called upon to resign by myself and others. Next year, if we have the majority in this committee, which we shall, you're still in office, you'll face impeachment. I ask you as a man, own this thing. Out of respect for you in the office, I ask you to reflect upon that. And I'll give you my remaining 45 seconds to respond. Please feel my spirit and speak truthfully. Step away from your talking points and speak to the American people and own this thing. We're losing our country down there. We need you to resign. Save the country the pain of your impeachment. I have 20 seconds, sir. Please respond.
Congressman, I couldn't disagree with you more when you state that our nation's sovereignty is disintegrating.
Are you kidding me? Is there anybody out there that thinks that our border is more secure under this president? You just heard, and he didn't even the whole thing was like, you should resign. Save the country the pain of the impeachment. And we're worried about the sovereignty of our country. He said, well, no, it's not disintegrating. There's not really been a reduction. Are you kidding me? The numbers speak for themselves. Do they think that we're stupid? That, you know, just because we see historic numbers of people crossing, we see terrorists that have been arrested of late, dozens of terrorists. We have seen a whole slew of child molesters that were arrested just last weekend, gang leaders, MS-13, drug cartel leaders. That was just last weekend. And yet, oh no problem with our border. And when the White House is asked, they say, oh, yeah, we're not vaccinating. We're not checking. We don't have a way to check of the criminal history in their home country. And they're moving too fast. We really can't even check here. And we're not doing vaccination because they're not going to be here that long. Meanwhile, they're shipping them onto flights to New York and everywhere else around the country, to Memphis, New York, cities all over America. These people think that we're a bunch of morons. And to me, when I looked at him, I thought this guy is inept, and he has really put our country in enormous jeopardy. And that line of him just sitting there saying, no, it's not really, less secure. Everything's fine. We're doing a really good job. I was astounded. To me, I've heard hogwash. That to me was unbelievable. That was over the top. And the fact that he stayed with that line no matter what, was like, no, everything's fine. Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about the terrorists. Don't worry about the drug dealers. Don't worry about the child molesters. Come on in. That makes the country so much more secure. This guy is really out to lunch. And to me, it really is frightening for American security and for the world's security, especially at an incredibly dangerous time right now. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Ed on line one. Ed, your thoughts about the actor Alejandro Mayorkas, not to be confused with Monteban, with the Fantasy Island, the plane.
Alejandro Mayorkas, Rita, the southern border is like Niagara Falls. Everybody's coming over. Fauci he declared the plague, everything is, it's over, right? To gain power within himself. He said, he's declaring everything done and over. Because you know what? He's over. His power's over. Nobody believes in him anymore. And
by the way, Ed, we're going to talk about that also later on in the show, because you bring up a great point, Ed, because here is Fauci, freewheeling Fauci, who is saying, he believes a phase of the pandemic is over, if you will. But yet, on the other hand, and I can't wait to get all your thoughts on this. And obviously, you picked up on that, Ed, too. And then there's Psaki on the other end, who's like, it's not, totally over yet, because they need to say that there's some COVID to keep the mask mandate that they want on mass transportation in America. Because remember, they're fighting that. But for some reason, there's like this invisible line at the border, Ed. I mean, that's the thing. It's like they're trying to have it both ways. Like, boy, is it terrible. Boy, are the planes really bad, and trains. But if you're a drug dealer in Mexico, come on in. Let's go to Pete on line 3. Go ahead, Pete.
Hi, Rita. How could these people lie? How do they keep a straight face? I mean, the border is secure. I mean, this is Saturday Night Live. Lauren Michaels must be having a ball. He's got more material. He could have a Saturday night, a Sunday night, and a Monday night. Just what's been happening the last couple of days. I can't believe it. I can't even put on like ABC News or the lies. I mean, how much? The only information that's legitimate is from your station, WABC, where I am so sick of it. I don't even want to turn the TV on unless watching a movie or a sports game. I mean, the way they report the news, how could they lie with a straight face? I mean,
could you believe, and you just heard what he said, that it is secure, and they're about to make it more secure. I mean, to me, that is an astounding comment. And then he also said, he did say it could be a crisis level if suddenly 18 to 20,000 of them cross a day, which is, by the way, the estimates of what the amount that will cross, when Title 42, should it get lifted, because they're fighting to lift it. That's about how many they think will be crossing at that point. That is a crisis. And he did concede that. He said, that could kind of overwhelm us. But he made it sound like, boy, they're like totally in control. No problems at the border. There's no issues at the border. No problem that we're not checking for criminal records, that we're not checking if they're vaccinated. I mean, it really, you hit it in a great way, Pete, because I feel like it's like an alternate universe. I felt like I was like watching like Star Trek and they were like on another planet, like where, hey, you're a terrorist, come on in. You're a drug dealer, come on in. I mean, it was really frightening, Pete. What was your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts, it's scary. I mean, don't these people have a conscience at all? I mean, right now, things are so bad. I just heard I don't know if it's true. I got a call that they extended for the evictions another 6 months. I mean, I see, like, landlords that and people that base their retirement that didn't have pensions on having a rental. And it's, like, terrible. And these tenants, with such a straight face, like, I'm staying here, they don't pay no rent.
But Pete, you hit it on the head because you're right. It's it fits with a lot of the other things that they are doing. And at the same time, they're pushing for more COVID relief, but yet no COVID on the border. They're also talking about the lifting of student loans. They're clearly trying to buy votes there. They're also pushing about green energy and electric cars and all that other stuff while we need gas. I mean, what a mess. And this White House is trying to have it both ways because on one hand, they're like, well, there are problems with COVID, and that's because we want a mask mandate in place on planes. And then on the other hand, anytime you ask them a border question, like the ones that came today to Jen Psaki at the White House press briefing, it's like, oh, well, you know what? The border seems to be very safe. That was sort of the message from Alejandro Mayorkas, who, by the way, tomorrow is going to be another day of grilling for him. And Jim Jordan gets a bite at him tomorrow. We heard from Jim Jordan in the last hour, but tomorrow Jim Jordan will be on the committee that actually gets to ask him questions tomorrow. So I can't wait to hear some of those exchanges because members of Congress are just as perplexed as I think most of you, and I certainly am, when I heard Mayorkas say, the border's safe, no problems there whatsoever. Everything's been effective. We're doing a great job. I mean, it is just such a bunch of hogwash. And they are still pushing, again, to lift Title 42, even though judges kind of keep stepping in and keep trying to say, no, you're overreaching. That's not appropriate. But if you ask Jen Psaki, as a number of reporters did today, how can you reconcile this mask mandate that you're pushing on mass transit in America, on planes and trains and buses, and then say that our southern border, there's no COVID, even though you're not testing them? You're not doing any of that. And if you listen to Circle Back Psaki, she kept circling back and she kept saying, oh, it's not our decision. The CDC on its own, we're listening to the science. And the CDC says it's okay on the border. The border is a pristine, beautiful place. Take a listen.
Mayorkas is getting a real grilling on Capitol Hill today, particularly about Title 42 and the plans that are in place to deal with it. DHS has acknowledged that a surge would put a substantial strain on resources. Now, obviously, DHS announced this 6.20-page plan. But given that strain that DHS is anticipating, why should the American people have confidence that you'll be able to deal with that surge of migrants if Title 42 is lifted?
Well, first I would say, just as a reminder, it is a health authority, not an immigration plan or an immigration authority, and it's not meant to be a replacement of. So the determination about where we stand and to lift it was made by the CDC.
Right. We had zero to do with it. We're just following the science. We're just checking. And speaking of the science, Mr. Science, freewheeling Fauci, has been feeling neglected of late because he hasn't been able to really weigh in. People haven't been asking him if he looks like Brad Pitt or if he's on the cover of People magazine. He's missing his moments. And so if he was the barometer of science, remember? And even the administration, this administration kept quoting him over and over and over again. But now they don't really like what he has to say. And this, to me, is such a bunch of hypocrisy. If you listen to this, first of all, here is Dr. Fauci. He did an interview with PBS, and he was asked, what do you think about the state of the pandemic? So listen to Mr. Science, Dr. Fauci.
How close are we to the end of this pandemic? Well, that's an unanswerable question for the following reason. And I don't want to be evasive about it, but let me tell you why I'm giving you that answer, Judy. We are certainly right now in this country out of the pandemic phase. Namely, we don't have 900,000 new infections a day and tens and tens and tens of thousands of hospitalizations and thousands of deaths. We are at a low level right now. So if you're saying, are we out of the pandemic phase in this country? We are.
So we're out of the pandemic phase. And then he further explained this.
Virus. If we can keep that level very low and intermittently vaccinate people, and I don't know how often that would have to be, Judy, that might be every year, that might be longer, in order to keep that level low. But right now, we are not in the pandemic phase in this country.
So why is this administration pushing for masking on mass transit? If the Mr. Science, the guy whose words were gospel to the Biden administration, all the way up until this interview, it seems, they were like, oh, that's what Dr. Fauci says. That's what Dr. Fauci says. And now they don't like what Dr. Fauci says because it doesn't necessarily work for them in their mask mandate. They'd rather he not say anything because no one can circle back like circle back Psaki. So this is her explanation when people were asking her today in the White House briefing, what do you make of Dr. Fauci saying that? Why is there a mask mandate that you're pushing?
What Dr. Fauci was saying is that we are in a different phase of this pandemic, and that's absolutely true. Last month, the president announced a plan for how we can move forward safely while staying on our front foot against COVID. As he pointed out, nationwide cases are relatively low, far below the 900,000 cases a day we saw during the Omicron surge, even as we've seen upticks. Hospitalizations are at about the lowest level since the pandemic, and deaths are declining. So there's no question that we're in a different moment in our fight against COVID. But we also know COVID isn't over, and the pandemic isn't over.
So she says COVID's not over, the pandemic's not over. That would be consistent with the mask mandate. So then why are you lifting Title 42? And you're telling me Fauci and these guys are not like conferring and he has no idea what CDC is doing and CDC is not political? That is such a bunch of hogwash, guys. And so then reporters said, wait a minute, okay, this weekend is the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I've been there many times. It's a great event. The who's who goes, but we're all clammed into a room. It's like a couple thousand people, by the way, in a room. And they're packed like sardines into the correspondence location, the hotel. It's the Washington Hilton down there in Washington, all right? So she was asked, so how do you reconcile the fact that President Biden is planning to go to speak at the event, but Dr. Fauci, who said, well, it's not really in a phase yet, he can't even keep his story straight, but he's still concerned about COVID, so much so that he's not going to go to the correspondents' dinner because he's worried about COVID. So it's like the administration can't keep their story straight, and then yet it's okay at the border. You got to keep, this is like a puzzle, guys. But listen to her explaining the difference between Biden going to a packed room, elderly guy too. I don't think he's necessarily in the greatest health, at least not mentally. And then Fauci. Listen to this one.
Dr. Fauci said that he's not going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, citing COVID concerns. Obviously, he's the president's chief medical advisor. As far as we know, the president is still planning to attend. How should people understand Dr. Fauci's decision versus the president's decision? And is there any concern that the president would be seen as not following the science in some way?
Well, first, I would note and respect everyone's privacy, including Dr. Fauci's, as much as he's very much a public figure. But as you all know, he can speak for himself and his decisions. And every individual will make their own decisions about whether they attend this event, other events, whether they wear a mask at it or not.
So when we like what Fauci says, oh, we're following the science, we're following the advice of Dr. Fauci. But now because the president wants to be seen with a bunch of journalists and other people and some celebrities and everything else that go to the correspondents' dinner, it's okay. Fauci just speaks for himself and everybody can make a different opinion. Wouldn't that have been the nice thing for this White House to have said to the average American? about decisions as to whether they're on a bus or a plane or at a restaurant? I mean, wouldn't it have been nice to say it's up to you to make your own decision? But because the president wants to go to this dinner to hobnob with journalists and to hobnob with celebrities and everybody else, it's okay, even though his chief medical officer says it's too dangerous and he won't go. This is unbelievable. And it's just like the mask mandate, put that in, but border, no problem with COVID there. Boy, are they picking and choosing. And if to me, this just epitomizes the double standards and the politics that really are at play. This has nothing to do with science. This is all about politics. 1-800-848-9222. Let's go to Paul on line 3. Go ahead, Paul, your thoughts.
Evening, Rita. If you can humor me. By the way, that Dewey, Cheatham, and Howell last night, that's from the Three Stooges attorneys. But moving on.
By the way, was that you or who called in? Was that you or someone else?
Somebody called in.
I remember.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I forgot about that. I love the Three Stooges, but I wasn't. By the way, I wasn't sure if it was them or even Abbott and Costello because they had some good ones too.
Yeah, that was the Stooges. But if you could humor me on this, if I could ask Mayorkas a couple of questions, this is what I would like to ask him. First question is, if you're doing a good job or a great job at the border, can you describe for us what a bad job would look like?
Oh, God. By the way, Paul, that would have been a great question. You're absolutely right. Like, if this is good, it's like I can't imagine what bad looks like.
Exactly. I got a couple more of you humor me here.
Sure.
Anytime I've gone overseas to another country, I need a passport. In some cases, a visa. Can you name any other country in the world where you could just show up and be considered part of the population?
That's a good one, too. Good one. Let's hear your next one, Paul. You're on a roll.
I'll keep going then. Mr. Mayorkas, when is your next trip to the border, and when was your last trip to the border?
How about when is your boss, the president, going to make his first trip? Because, Paul, he hasn't even done his first trip, the president. He literally drove near the border on a campaign stop years ago. And, I mean, isn't that amazing at a time like this that he hasn't even made an effort to go? Because he doesn't want to go because he knows it'll draw attention to the problems. He doesn't care.
Absolutely not. I mean, I thought he said he went there many times, or was that the vice president said she's been there many times?
That was her many times, and she did do a quick stop. Remember, I think it was in McAllen, Texas, but she did a couple hours stopover. That's all she's done as being head of the border. Because he put it on her because he doesn't want to deal with it. He doesn't care. That's why I think he gave it to her. Paul, great call. Thank you very much. Take a listen to this exchange. This is Jennifer Griffin of Fox News, who was talking with Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. And I'm trying to figure out, why is our administration, as we're talking about them being, I just think on Mars in terms of their reaction to the border, saying the border is secure. That was from Mayorkas today. And Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, seems to not be able to say, we want to boot Russia out of Ukraine. We want Ukraine to 1,000% win. He's asked, what do you think the objective is? And he says, well, it's basically to weaken Russia. Why are they so mamsy-pamsy about this? How can Ukraine win if the leader of the free world and his administration is just, walking around on eggshells with Putin? Take a listen.
Yesterday, you said the goal is to weaken Russia at the end of this conflict. Why not say defeat Russia? Are you expecting Russia to pull back to the pre-February 24th lines or the pre-2014 lines?
To be clear, we're not in a fight with Russia. Ukraine is in a current struggle with Russia, and what Ukraine desperately wants is to make sure that it can protect its sovereign territory. And we want to make sure that we're helping Ukraine do that. And so what you've seen us do from the very beginning, and even before this conflict, this invasion started, we were providing Ukraine with security assistance to be able to defend itself if it ever needed to. And of course, once it was invaded, we and our allies picked up the pace in terms of providing meaningful security assistance.
Yeah, once it was invaded, then we sort of tried to pick up the pace. Yeah, it almost sounds like the way they're handling the border.